What is up, guys? Mike Marlinski here with Wretched Sound. Welcome to our Black Sabbath podcast series, and it's a special night because we are discussing Black Sabbath's 13th studio album, The Eternal Idol. And we're discussing this studio album number 13 on Friday the 13th. It is August 13th, 2021. Very stoked about this episode, and I know my partner in crime, Billy Page, is equally stoked about this episode because she has been talking to me about the Tony Martin era of Black Sabbath since the very beginning, when I first asked her to start doing this series with me. The thing she was most stoked about was getting into the Tony Martin era. Obviously, for those of you who know, at least, in 1987, Black Sabbath released The Eternal Idol. Ray Gillen was originally on vocals. Apparently, according to Tony Iommi and a few other parties, he couldn't hack it. He was replaced by Tony Martin, and from there, it went into... Tony Martin gave us... the final version of the official version of the Eternal Idol. Tony Martin also helped give us Headless Cross and Tear, and the controversial Forbidden, featuring Ice Cube, which we'll get into in a few episodes, which I cannot wait to discuss. But anyway, getting back on track. Studio album 13, The Eternal Idol. Let's give Billy Page a call and dive right in. Thank you so much for tuning in once again.
Hello.
Howdy do.
How's it going?
It's going very well. How are you?
All
right. Ready to discuss some more Black Sabbath, I'm assuming.
You cut out for a second there.
Oh, okay. You're ready to discuss some more Black Sabbath, I'm assuming, correct?
Oh, yeah, always ready.
Always ready.
Especially for this era.
Oh, yeah, I know. Kind of already introed that in. I wanted to talk about your love of Tony Martin a little bit before we started. But, okay, so, I'm ready for this Eternal Idol conversation if you are.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, so... here we are discussing Black Sabbath's 13th studio album on Friday the 13th. And since the beginning of this series, the thing you've talked about the most is your excitement over Tony Martin's vocals. So can you recall the first song that made you fall in love with his voice?
Headless Cross.
The title track from Headless Cross?
Yep.
Yeah, there we go. And now getting into... his first record with the band, Eternal Idol. Right off the bat with the opener, The Shining, when looking back, I actually get some pretty big Scorpions vibes, like especially from the chorus of The Shining, and it reminds me of the song Alien Nation, which is on the Scorpions album Face the Heat. And there are just little, I don't know if you've ever, found similarities between those two bands, on this album in particular, but it happened a couple times where I was thinking that, as I recall.
Honestly, I'm not really a big Scorpions fan.
Yeah.
So I've never really dived into their stuff enough to catch that.
Right.
But it makes sense in the era of when this came out. The 80s were a big time for the Scorpions.
Yeah.
And I think if I listened to more of the Scorpions, I'd probably hear the similarities of them and just a lot of bands I like from this era.
Yeah.
And obviously, maybe not as much with Black Sabbath. It could be more coincidence, but the Scorpions are a big influential band for a lot of people. So. Oh yeah, and
the specific things that I hear when I listen to this record that remind me of Scorpions, the Scorpion songs that I'm thinking of, they came out years later. So if there was anything intentionally done, it was Black Sabbath influencing them potentially and not the other way around. But so what are your favorite musical moments of the Eternal Idol record? So what immediately jumps out for me are the the clean guitar intro of The Shining, and then in Ancient Warrior, it's the intro and the Middle Eastern sounding like verse, riff, and lead too. And then there's like a choir effect in the chorus, which has this super 80s movie soundtrack vibe to it. And then, of course, there's the keyboard intro of Nightmare. So, like, when it comes to this record, what are your favorite musical moments?
The keyboard intro to Nightmare would definitely be one of my favorite also.
Yeah.
Even though I wish it transitioned into the song smoother and wasn't just like a dead stop.
Right.
But it's like a good intro. And overall, I think this album has like great keyboard moments. Like the keyboards under everything, I think really adds a lot to this album. Not that there's anything wrong, but I mean they really shine, which I guess makes sense because at this point Tony and Jeff were in the band the longest.
Yeah.
You know, but there's I don't know how to describe it, but there's this part in the song Glory Ride, where they kind of do like this quick, kind of like melodic interlude part, and then go back into it, which I think is a real cool transition. Even though Glory Ride's definitely not one of my favorite songs on the album,
right.
That part is one that like really stood out to me.
Yeah.
And the choruses of The Shining, I think are really good. There's like one I just think is executed very well, and another reason why I think it's really good, but we'll address that when we get into another part of this later.
Yeah, sure.
Because it has to do with Ray's version.
Right, for sure. So guitar-wise, it seems that Tony Iommi clicked right back into Black Sabbath riff writing mode with this album. Not to say that Seventh Star was a bad record. I just think this further enforces what we were saying about how Seventh Star should have been a Tony Iommi solo record. And I was just wondering if you heard that, like when you listen to the Black Sabbath albums in chronological order like we are, like do you hear like a sudden like snap back into the chronology, like, okay, we're playing Black Sabbath guitar again? I was just wondering if you felt that way about it.
Absolutely. And like you said, it reinforces how Seventh Star should have been a solo album. This record sounds more like a natural progression of the Black Sabbath sound.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right way to do it, because then it doesn't sound like classic Black Sabbath, but that's also because you don't have anybody else there.
Sure.
But it's kind of like a return to I think like Seventh Star. It reinforces it on Seventh Star. Tony Iommi was very intentionally trying to do something different.
Right.
Like not a metal record. He was trying to do a rock record.
Yeah.
Which some people the differences might sound, but you can hear the difference. The only thing that would make me kind of question that kind of attitude about it, even though I think that's what the case was, I think at this point, even though this was the first album with Tony Martin, we also have the other albums after it to compare it to.
Yeah.
And he was the next longest vocalist who was with Black Sabbath besides Ozzy.
Sure.
And one of the things I think make it sound more like a Sabbath sound is they had more consistency. They ended up being more consistent after this point.
Right, because that's why this is such a confusing time, because it's Tony Iommi with a completely different group every fucking record. Like,
right, and then this starts a more consistent effort.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If it didn't, like if he kept switching vocalists also, I mean the vocalists it makes a big difference in a band like
huge,
this.
Especially with clean vocals. It's huge.
Yeah, and if he kept switching singers every album, I can't help but wonder, would we be thinking this is a consistent Sabbath sound?
Sure, right.
I don't really have an answer for that, but it's just something that occurred to me. It's like, because that's something I was thinking about too, and it was like, is it a return to Sabbath, or does it just seem that way because it was just a return to it was the beginning of a return to consistency.
Yeah.
So you can hear more similarities between this and all the other Tony Martin records.
Yeah, you could just tell. You could just tell that he felt a certain way about writing, about songwriting. He felt stronger about this album, and I don't think the record label had as much to do with it as it had in the past, like with the creative decisions. There's just a sense about this album that kind of it's almost like a homecoming for Tony Iommi, even though he is again performing with a completely new group aside from Jeff Nichols.
Right.
So it's just super interesting, how. But no, you're right. Maybe he had that sense about it. Like, okay, well, I feel great about the lineup that I've landed here and the sound that I'm going for here, and I think I'm ready to give Black Sabbath a serious go again, and I'm done experimenting, at least experimenting so much and doing such a departure.
Right, and then this ended up being his last record with Warner Brothers.
Yeah. Right. So we always bring up the album cover, and this has an interesting story behind it. So the cover depicts two models reenacting an 1889 sculpture of the same name, the Eternal Idol. And apparently, they did it this way with models because they failed to get the permission to use a photo of the original sculpture. So they had these two models, and they're covered in bronze paint. And apparently, the paint was toxic, and the two models had to be hospitalized after the shoot. So that's an interesting little backstory behind the cover. But so just as an album cover, how do you feel about it? I think it's another bland album cover. Whether they got models or they took a photo of the original sculpture, again, it's not a real standout cover to me, but how do you feel about the album cover for this one?
Yeah, I agree. It's not a real standout album cover, even though the story about it makes it a little better.
Right, sure. Sure.
I mean, it sucks, but it kind of makes it a little more interesting.
Right. Yeah, one thing, and for the different types of media that this is released on now, there's another thing I noticed on the CD version I have of this, and I first noticed this with Born Again, actually. So now, if you look at the CDs, the discs themselves, and in some cases on the back covers, like starting on Born Again up until now, there is a recurring devil image, and it's like a white silhouette with an outstretched open palm and a levitating star. And I don't know if you have that on any of the versions you have.
I only have it on vinyl.
Oh, okay.
I have not noticed that.
Yeah, that's not on records, is it? That's not on the record or on the vinyl. That might just be on the reissued copy on CD that I have. But it starts right at Born Again. That image starts appearing on every album. Like if you get the reissued CD. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's a cool. I like it when bands do stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a recurring theme. It's pretty cool. Like the album covers are so different from one another, but there's this recurring thing. It's almost like having a second logo, because even the Black Sabbath logo is changing consistently during this period. Go through a lot. I mean, I don't even know if you could call it a logo. They're just changing fonts quite a bit. So you wanted to talk about Ray Gillen as well. Ray Gillen was the original vocalist intended for this record, but quit to join Badlands when Black Sabbath returned to England. The original tracks with Ray on vocals were officially released, and I haven't heard these at all, even though you sent me the folder a few weeks ago. So what are your... I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. What are your thoughts on Ray Gillen's takes on the songs prior to Tony Martin joining the band?
They're interesting. I really like him as a vocalist. I love Badlands. I think they're an incredible band. That Black Sabbath album kind of proves how a band like Badlands is much more suited for his voice than Black Sabbath is. It's not terrible by any means, and it's definitely an interesting listen. But I think it reinforces how how much Tony Martin was a much more suitable singer for Black Sabbath. Like I was talking about, the one thing I really noticed mostly was his take on the song, The Shining. Like in the chorus, when Ray does it as opposed to Tony, it's just like Tony just gives it so much more like bump and just like an intensity in that chorus.
Yeah, the really power of it, right?
I think adds a lot. And if you get around to listening to the other one and the way Ray does it, it's just not as enthusiastic.
Right.
And again, because this is Black Sabbath going back more metal, and he's a rock vocalist.
Yeah.
You know, and Tony Martin has more of like a metal voice. He has that tone. He has that delivery.
Yeah.
He's a metal singer, and Ray's a rock singer. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think a couple of the more rocky songs, his voice definitely suits very well. But again, even though it does, it makes him more rocky songs.
Yeah.
Where with someone like Tony Martin singing it, and it would have been the same if Ozzy was singing it, because they have such like a very just kind of like metal quality to their voice. That's something that's more straight up rock. They can just their vocal delivery over it makes it sound more metal, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think it was good that he quit the band. I think it was better for Black Sabbath, better for Badlands.
Yeah, better for both parties, absolutely, yeah.
Right, and it was definitely better for Ray because that self-titled, that even though Badlands didn't take off afterwards, that self-titled Badlands album was definitely more successful than anything Black Sabbath did in that time period.
Yeah, and, you know, to me, like, Tony Martin wasn't just the right voice, it was also the right voice at the right time, because at this point we're into the late 80s, and any music, rock or metal, in the late 80s that stood out had to have a powerful singer. And that whether it's rock or metal, and that's exactly what Tony Martin brought to the table. So,
yeah,
right.
Definitely, he was the right choice.
Mm-hmm. So, we kind of talked about this already, but this album features another standalone lineup for the band with, it's Eric Singer on drums and it's Bob Daisley on bass, and for me, like, the performances and songwriting on Eternal Idol helped steer the band back on a more enjoyable course, at least for me, but still fell short of the works of Geezer Butler and Bill Ward, like in that original Ozzy era, even. So, like, what are your thoughts on that? I just felt like the original rhythm section was the best rhythm section, but I don't know, chemistry-wise.
You're right, and that's not taking anything away from Bob Daisley and Eric Singer. They're fucking amazing musicians, you know, and they definitely, like Bob Daisley, definitely is a big part of songwriting for bands that he's in too, but. You know, when it comes down to it, he's not Geezer Butler.
Right.
And
yeah.
I mean, and who can be? It's really like an unfair. Maybe like technically speaking, they might be just as good as each other, but creatively speaking, Geezer Butler just like adds so much to Black Sabbath's sound.
Yep.
You know, and the same thing with Bill Ward on drums. It's like technically any of these drummers they've had are just as good, but, you know, Bill Ward kind of, you know, his style, it really, some bands, it's not even like about this sheer musicianship of it. It's like
it's about the personality. It's about the personality of the musician. Black Sabbath is like personality is essential to Black Sabbath, and that is why Tony Iommi writing guitar riffs a certain way is crucial to whether or not the album should be considered a Black Sabbath album or not. It shouldn't be a Black Sabbath album just because Tony Iommi's playing on it, but it's that which personality is he going to use in the riff writing. And Geezer Butler played bass and wrote lyrics the same way, and Bill Ward plays drums and he sings the same way, with all of themselves put into it.
And it's not really fair to everybody else who follows because you're following this group of people who were friends beforehand.
Yeah.
And they created this band, so they have this chemistry with each other that no matter how good you are, it's just not going to be the same.
Yeah, camaraderie is huge. Yeah.
You know, and it's just like, that's why it's like when bands change lineups, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And there's always things you can kind of be like, well, you know, this person did it better. And there's not many bands I can think of where it's really that huge of a difference, but Black Sabbath, I think you can see a noticeable difference. Even though I like all the other Black Sabbath stuff, I definitely don't get as excited about the rhythm section parts as I do about the classic lineup. Just matter of factly, none of them have really compared to that team of Bill Ward and Geezer Butler.
Yep.
And I mean, like, I can think of like other bands. Like, again, there's not many bands, but some bands where people don't really talk about it, where there's like this amazing rhythm section, and you're like, well, technically they might not be the best, but the way they worked and complemented the band they were playing with, it's just, I don't think anybody could replicate it.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Well put as usual. Okay, so another fun fact. The lineup changed again for the tour in support of the album. So we changed lineups for the album. The lineup changes yet again for the subsequent tour in support of the album. Geezer Butler was brought back into the fold, but quit when he realized that Black Sabbath had booked dates in apartheid-era South Africa. Just to name one change. There were a couple other names thrown in. I think Joe Burt was one of them. A few people came and went, and then they did a music video for The Shining, and they had a no-name bass player. And it was Tony Martin who said that we just grabbed a guy off the street. I don't remember his name. He was a guitar player, but could fake bass for the video or something like that. I haven't watched the video. I don't know if you have. But that's what I was getting at. I wanted to ask you about the Shining video, and if it's literally like what Tony Martin said in the interview, which was that they grabbed a guy off the street and he didn't really know the song, basically.
I guess you don't really have to for a video, though.
Because at this point, they're just grabbing people. I mean, the lineup changes every album, and it's changing for every tour, and then it changes again for the music video. So that is, it's just redonkulous at this point, what's happening in this band. Like,
yeah.
Unreal. So, I think I already know the answer, but I still want to have a discussion about it. If you had to pick a favorite track from Eternal Idol, what's it going to be?
Oh, man. I don't know. A favorite track would probably be, like, again, The Shining, or I think Nightmare's really good.
Yeah.
Ancient Warrior. Maybe we'd come down between those three.
Yeah, see, I was gonna say The Shining. I was really gonna say it because, you know, when you get into an album and you listen to it for years, like, I think no matter how many times you listen to an album, track one, if it's a strong opener, pops into your head first, no matter what. Right. But, I didn't want to say The Shining, and honestly, I do like Ancient Warrior more. And, I also love, I also love Nightmare, and one thing that was interesting about Nightmare that I learned, I don't think it made, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if it made it onto the soundtrack or not, but it was originally recorded to appear on the Nightmare on Elm Street 3 soundtrack. And I don't remember, and I didn't actually research to see if it actually made it onto it, but it sounded like it didn't make it onto the movie soundtrack. But that's why that song was written.
Yeah, I don't know if it ever did. The way it's worded in things, I'm going to assume it didn't. But since we have access to the internet, why don't we check that out?
Yeah.
Even though sometimes checking out soundtracks is kind of not the easiest thing to come across.
Yeah. So Nightmare on Elm Street 3 soundtrack.
Because then there's going to be the story score, and then there's the soundtrack.
Right. The score,
And everybody's more into scores now, myself included. So I don't really have like the rock soundtrack, even though the Dawkins song from that obviously is amazing.
Right. It's Dream Warriors. It's Dream Warriors.
Right,
So
yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'm just looking at the score right now, and yeah. Oh, here we go. I think this is going to be the same thing. Dokken did 3 tracks on this. Joey's Wet Dream. Yeah, I just see the score and then a bunch of a handful of Dokken songs that
Maybe
made it
they
out
never
here.
released an official soundtrack for it.
Right.
I'll have to watch it again and see if the song pops up in there. They might not have actually released like the soundtrack for it.
Right. Yeah.
Like, sometimes that happens.
Well, my next question for you is actually, I think it's kind of silly because I know what you're going to say, but I still want to talk about it because it's something that exists out in the world and it should be discussed. So first of all, which do you prefer? The earlier version of Black Moon on the Eternal Idol single B-side, if you even have that or if you've even heard it, or the later version that appears on Headless Cross?
Yeah, actually, I never heard the original B-side.
Okay, yeah, I checked it out, and it is, it's just, you know what it is? It's, well, at least compared to Headless Cross, it sounds like a demo. So, and obviously, like, we both love Headless Cross, so, like, there is no way to, like that bias isn't gonna go away. But, I just thought that was another cool thing. I wanted to bring that up because if you get a certain version of the single, of the title track, or I think a certain reissue of this album, songs that were later decided to be on Headless Cross also appeared on this record. So that's cool too. So what is your... And I know you're going to say Headless Cross, but I think it'll lead into a discussion about other Tony Martin records. So what is your favorite Tony Martin album with Sabbath and why? And mine is absolutely Headless Cross, but actually it was Tear for a long time because of the Norse mythology lyrics, because I liked that they were getting away from Satan for a minute, or at least Tony Martin was, because I know it was Tony Iommi who told Tony Martin to cool it on the satanic shit, because the band is about so much more. Oh, but one other thing really quick that I did want to bring up when we talked about we talked about Ancient Warrior and Nightmare absolutely being my favorite tracks. So yeah, I thought I had more to that. My favorite songs, but like I'm really trying to like salvage something else, but like I think it's just gonna come down between those two. So never mind. I'm done talking about favorite songs. So your favorite Tony Martin album with Sabbath and why?
Headless Cross. It's the heaviest. It's classic. It was my introduction to Tony Martin and Black Sabbath, which I think really makes a huge difference for a lot of things. It happens to just be like the title track. It's just so classic. I feel like I could just go on about it where it's like we'd practically be in the discussion about that album right now.
Mm-hmm.
But that and Tear are both fucking amazing albums.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the two Tony Martin albums that you just cannot, like, any of the other ones I could see some people being like, well, this, and, having some complaints about, but man, the Headless Cross and Tear are fucking perfect albums. And I want to double check this, but as we're talking about all the switching lineups, I kind of feel like they might have the most consistency between those two albums. But I could be wrong about that. I'd have to double check.
There's something I want to look up right now about Headless Cross so that I'm not asking you, so that I can answer my own question. I just want to look really quick at the personnel. If I could look at the personnel. Yeah, it is. You know what? It is Jeff Nichols. It is Jeff Nichols. And one thing I wanted to bring up about Headless Cross is that you already brought this up, and we've been talking about Jeff Nichols for like the last few episodes because it's such an integral part of what this band would become, that keyboard presence. So I mean, that's a huge part of the Eternal Idol, is the constant use of keyboards. And that's another thing that's really dated. Like, you need powerful keyboards and powerful vocals if you're going to stand out as a rock or metal band in the late 80s. But with Headless Cross, that was the first thing that jumped out at me about that record, was the incredible presence of epic keyboards mixed in with those evil, dark fucking lyrics. But I don't want to get too far into the Headless Cross conversation just yet. We'll save that.
Right.
But no, I just have to bring up Jeff Nichols one more time, because it's just, that is, at the very least, he is getting the majority of the writing credits for keyboards at this point. So I know that again, it's a very confusing period in the band's history. I mean, I know that even if you go into the liner notes of the Eternal Idol, other people are getting drum credits and bass credits, even though they weren't the final people to perform on the record, and things like that. Or I think there was a Bevan in there, and I can't remember all these names right now, but like, people were getting credits for like specific parts of songs, or things that came later after the official version was released. It's all kind of fuzzy to me right now, but it's...
Well, what's really funny about that is how Bob Daisley didn't get credit, even though he played on the album.
Yeah, right.
And I feel like that dude, as like an awesome contributor he was to bands, mostly Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne, they both just seem to fuck him.
Yeah. Was it that Daisley didn't write the bass parts?
Was it what?
Was it that Daisley didn't write the bass?
I don't know. I feel like he's one of the people who Sharon and him like butt heads on songwriting credits. For some of the Ozzy stuff. I can't remember exactly. I don't think it was him with Shot in the Dark.
Yeah.
So I know that's a big one, but I can't remember if it was him or a different bass player.
Right.
But I think for a lot of those musicians, it's more like, I just want credit.
Yeah.
Well, with Bob Daisley's probably money too, and with Sharon, she just looks at it as, well, that's more money.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Story, and I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure I've heard Bob Daisley come up as one of the not so happy contributors to Ozzy albums too.
Yeah, and we have not been shy about our feelings on Sharon this entire series. So that's another cool thing to bring up at the end that I wasn't expecting to talk about. Any closing thoughts from you this evening? Because I'm out of stuff unless you have more that you want to contribute.
I mean, again, like all the albums, I think Eternal Idol is a very solid album. Definitely like a transition album in a sense. You see a return to form, but you can see some remnants in there of what he was trying to do with Seven Stars, so it's not like entirely that.
Right.
I think if people haven't checked it out, and if anyone feels inspired to after this, I think it's a little important to keep in mind. And again, I think it's like Tony Martin's vocals that really help anchor it back into the metal world.
Yep.
On like those, because like about 3 of the songs are more like they almost could have been on the Seventh Star.
Right.
And but he was coming out of that, so I don't dislike it. But I'm glad to see that. I'm glad he took the heavier moments of this album and then just went on from there with the rest of the stuff he wrote from Sabbath from that point on.
Sure.
don't write off the Tony Martin album. I guess don't write off the Tony Martin era because of this album, because it gets better.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there's anything wrong with this album, but I could see where people might be like, well, I don't know.
Right.
It's a transition back into form. So if you give up hope, you gotta come back around for Headless Cross.
Well, most fans of the band, they really listen to most of what Tony Iommi says without question. And Tony Iommi has brought this up in several interviews that I read about this record, that he wishes more people would just check out this album, because he feels that it's the most overlooked album and that there are some really strong songs on it. And I totally agree with that. I totally agree that, you know, it's not just a good Black Sabbath album that's overlooked. It's a good metal album. It's a good rock album. It's a good late 80s album.
Exactly.
And if you're into anything like that, like we've already talked about Scorpions, we've named a couple like bands. If you're into anything like that and you haven't heard this album, you would like this album.
Right.
Yeah.
If you have to, pretend it's not a Black Sabbath album.
Sure.
Sound-wise, though, it fits into that whole late 80s rock metal.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't acknowledge, I think the majority of Sabbath fans don't acknowledge anything outside of the Ozzy era, the original Ozzy era. So, again, that's a good point. I mean, you'll love it musically, but you might have to tell yourself it's not a Black Sabbath album.
Right, but it fits in. If you like that late 80s rock and metal, you should like this.
Yeah.
And because of Tony Iommi, not because it's Tony Iommi, but because he's such a good songwriter, it's a little bit more above average than most of it.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Well, I think this was yet another healthy discussion between us. I am excited to get into Headless Cross next week, as I know you are.
Yeah. But probably not next week.
Well, whenever we can.
We'll get to it soon. But we'll get to it soon. We're gonna really dive. Everybody's gotta get ready for that one.
Yeah, we're not on anyone's schedule. We don't work for our listeners, so we're.
Yeah,
when you are ready to take this deep dive, I will be ready to entertain it.
It's going to be some... Man, those are the albums.
Yeah, I know. You are absolutely going to be taking the reins on the next 2 episodes at the very least, I'm sure. But I'm beyond ready, and I'm stoked.
Awesome.
All right, well, you have yourself a great night, and I will talk to you soon.
You too, Mike. Thanks again for including me on this.
All right. Later.
Bye.